that I know every entrepreneur that starts a business is going to go through excruciatingly difficult moments that feel like they're only happening to them, where it makes more sense to quit.
What would you say if you got to sit down with a real life dragon from UK's Dragon's Den? For those of you guys that don't know, UK's Dragon's Den is the US's version of Shark Tank. Well, at a live event that we host every single year called the Entrepreneurs Marketing Conference, I had the privilege to do just that. I'm about to take you live from EMC, where I interviewed the one and only Steven Bartlett from Dragon's Den. Steven Bartlett, for those of you guys that don't know, also is the host of one of the world's biggest podcasts, The Diary of a CEO. And the reason he sits on the seat on Dragon's Den is because he sold his social media marketing agency for a whopping estimated £200 million. Let's go live to EMC right now, where I sit down and interview Steven Bartlett.
Brother, let's go. Wow, what an intro, eh? Does it make you feel weird hearing an intro like that? Because I from what I know about you, and from what I've sort of gauged from listening to you, watching you for years, you were standing over there quite uncomfortable then.
So uncomfortable.
I knew it as well. I was like, he's
weird.
hated this
because you don't know where to look or what to say. And it's when you hear someone else describe your life, it kind of is an out of body experience. It's very surreal.
Yeah.
So just I don't spend any time thinking about any of those things. I spend 0% of my time thinking about those things. And to be completely honest, none of them mean anything to me. Like, I know they're like things I've done in the past or things I've accomplished, but they don't mean a lot to me in the sense of they don't have an impact on how I think and feel about myself.
But if you were to think back when you were younger, were they the things that mattered to you? Was that basically what one day you wanted all that
100%.
Right.
And like word for word. For example, the Dragon's Den thing. When I got when Dragon's Den contacted, I said to my team, "Do you know what? I want to be a dragon." And I've been watching Dragon's Den since I was 12, right? So I actually applied for Dragon's Den when I was 18. And if you want to see the application, it's at the top of my Twitter page, pinned there. And I applied 10 years to the week before the day that I was announced as a dragon. But also, I was watching the show since I was 12, and I told my team, do you know what? 2 years ago, I said, do you know what? I want to be a dragon on Dragon's Den. We'd done nothing about it. We hadn't spoken to the BBC, hadn't reached out to them. And then 3 months after I said that to my team, in the chat and WhatsApp, I get an email from the BBC. And it's like, with all of these things, I wanted them, I willed them into my life. And I'm not someone that sits around believing in visualization in the typical sense of the word, because I think like visualization's like setting the sat nav. If you don't turn the car on and drive, you're still going to be sat on your driveway or in your garage. So but it's funny in hindsight how those things, as you say, that list of things became my life.
So when you first, I didn't realise that. So when you were 18 and you first applied for Dragon's Den, what business was that? Was that Social Chain?
That was for so I dropped out of university at 18 to start a company called Wall Park, and it was for that business. And it's pinned at the top of my Twitter. It says, today I applied for Shell Livewire, which was nodding your head, which was, I think back then was another way to get some money. And I applied for Dragon's Den for my company, and like both ignored me.
Right.
And I never got on either, so yeah.
Okay. So let's go back there then, because one of the first things that I wanted to ask you, because I think everyone would be super interested, like, where did your life as an entrepreneur sort of start? Was it around in your teenage years?
Yeah.
Take us from there to start in Social Chain, that place, because I'm interested in that.
Sure. So context matters, because I think like the context of your childhood creates the person. Usually in psychology, that tends to be the case, and so. The context of my childhood was I grew up in Devon and Cornwall, in Plymouth, and I think Chris Rock has this great quote, which I write about in my book, where he says, we were like poor enough to grow up in a middle class area, and that was like describe my family, but also on top of that, not only were we like the poorest people in this fairly nice area, when I say, just to give you the visual, we had 6-foot-high grass at the front and back of our house. Half the back of my house was knocked down and derelict. The windows on the front of my house were smashed. But if you looked at our neighbors' houses, perfect. Beautiful houses. So that, again, this just creates a context and a contrast. And contrast is how we attribute value. So in a world full of iPhones, the Nokia feels inadequate, right? And why was the Nokia amongst iPhones growing up? And that does something to you. And to exacerbate that, I was the only black kid in my school of about, other than my brothers and sisters and maybe one other, of about 1,500 kids. So you're trying to figure out why your hair is curly and why your skin is a different color. And again, that exacerbates this feeling of that you're different and that you want to be the same as the other kids. And so because we had nothing, and because then my parents were never in, so my dad worked in London 5 days a week. My mum can't read or write. She never could. She still can't. And we didn't have money. I had this deep insecurity that was driving me to get those things and to fit in and to conform. But because they weren't around, I learned that if you are to get things, it's going to be a direct consequence of action, my action. Which means that when I wake up in the morning, there's no money there on the counter or packed lunch or food. I have to go and do something to get that. And that void created independence. That insecurity created drive. And so 15 years old, 14 years old, I'm just trying to start businesses all over the place. Same stories you'll hear about a lot of entrepreneurs. Did a deal with a vending machine company. So my school didn't have to buy vending machines. So we got all of the vending machines for free and we got a 20% cut. Was running all of the school trips for my school, just thinking...
Well, even at like 15 this was?
So 16 was when I started doing... My school had given me a wall, like the size of this wall, and it was Steve's wall to market my event. So I was doing the school trips. Thorpe Park we went to, I would do the coaches, the consent forms, the beanie hats so people wouldn't get lost. I'd market it. And then I was thinking of an event every 2 times a month, and I was taking a cut. I wasn't going to lessons, though. So I got expelled... when I was from sixth form, they kicked me out of sixth form. They actually expelled me twice. The first time, and I've been back to my school twice and told this story, and they tell me not to tell it, but don't invite me then. I'm going to keep it facts because I think it's important for the kids that aren't doing well in school to know that I also didn't do well in school. So the school tell me not to say it, but I say it anyway. They expelled me the first time, and I took the letter and gave it to head of Key Stage 5, Mr. Sprinkle. He rips it up and goes, "You make the school a lot of money. You're my Harry Potter, so I keep you under the stairs. If Mr. Thomas gives you another one of these, just let me know." But Mr. Thomas was kind of like more operationally in charge, so he banned me from everything, from the football team, from school trips, from the prom. But they kept me because I made the school a lot of money. And then in the last month of school, Mr. Thomas got his way and they kicked me out when I could basically make them no more money. And I went off to university, Manchester Met.
So what made you make that decision to go to uni then? So you obviously weren't fitting in at school, as a lot of entrepreneurs don't.
Yeah.
So what made you make that decision to? First of all, what were you going to study? But what made you want to do more education?
I was going to study business, and the reason I went was because I thought it would be different.
Right. Okay.
I thought it would be different.
You thought to run a real business, you've got to have a real business degree.
100%. And I thought that's what university was going to give me. I thought I was going to go there, and they were going to say, "Steve, here's how you start a business. Here's how you run it. Here's how you build a business." And I pull up, maybe to the wrong lecture, because he was talking about love a lot. But I pull up, and the guy is on about, he's giving me like felt tips. And he's telling me to make a poster, and everyone else is asleep and drunk. And I think, oh, not this shit again. Like, this is school again. Like, this is not going to give me what I need to go where I need to go.
Well, your peers were asleep
everyone
or
was
drunk?
asleep. They're all drunk and asleep. It was Freshers Week.
Freshers Week.
They're all pissed and drunk. And I thought, oh my God, I genuinely, I don't know how this sounds, but I also don't care. Like, I looked over on the desk next to me, and I remember thinking, and she was asleep on the desk, drunk, and I remember thinking, we're both going to the same place.
Because you're in the same place.
We're in the same place. I thought, we're both going to get the same piece of paper and we're going to go to the same place. And I'll never forget that thought. I remember what she looks like, and it was like 10 years ago. And I thought, nah, this isn't it. And I left, went to the business office after that first lecture, told them I wanted to defer, never came back. Called my mum, said, "Mum, I've got this business idea, I'm going to start a business." She said, "If you start the business, I'll never speak to you again."
Really?
And she meant it, yeah. And I didn't speak to her for 2.5 years.
Jesus.
And I was broke. When I say broke, I mean, this is well documented, but I was living in Moss Side. My rent was 100 quid, couldn't pay it, didn't pay it 4 months, got CCJs, because the problem with dropping out that quickly is you don't get your student loan. which I found out in hindsight. So I had this huge debt with the university. My parents weren't speaking to me at all. And I'm in Manchester, like stealing Chicago town pizzas, going into takeaways, taking chicken bones off the tables. Because when you get to the point where the pain in your stomach, like you're on the floor holding your stomach because you haven't eaten for like 3 days. So you'll do anything. And I did anything to feed myself back then. Like, you just had to. But, it sounds miserable, but I was as happy then as I am now. And I reflect on that a lot. And when I say that, people don't believe me. And I've always wondered why. But I was pursuing myself.
But did you, because I've heard you say this before. So the question is, back then though, were you consciously aware you were happy? Or is it in hindsight, looking back, you were happy back then?
The whole time I felt the same. And it's because I was and you'll see this in my diary. I kept this diary on Facebook, which is still there. If anyone wants to see it, you can pull it up. But I've shown it in talks and stuff. I didn't believe that was my destination. There was zero part of me that thought I was going to spend the rest of my life in Moss Side. If you look at my diary, that kid from day one in 2012, when it starts, knew he was going to be a millionaire. And in fact, the reason why my book is called Happy, Sexy Millionaire is because in the front page of my physical diary, I write, here are my 4 goals before I'm 25. I'm going to have a Range Rover Sport as my first car, which I did. And I couldn't even drive when I wrote that. I couldn't drive until I was 23, right? I'm going to be a millionaire before I'm 25, which I was. I'm going to work on my body image because I was like super skinny and wasting away. I'm going to get a girlfriend. And then even more crazy was in my digital diary online. In the front page, the first entry, I write that I'm recording this diary because a production company have asked me to record it because one day they want to make a documentary on how I became successful. No production company asked me to do that. And it's weird because I genuinely didn't know how to write in my own diary that I really believed that this was going to be recorded one day and turned into a film. So I have this old shitty Samsung phone. I'm going around my house. I'm going around this bedsit that I'm in, showing how bad it is, because one day I'm going to have to show this footage to a room full of people. So you see me open the fridge and go, nothing in there. And then I go down on my desk and all these red bailiff letters from the university because I hadn't paid my hall's rent or whatever. And I'm showing it, and I'm smiling and I'm going, this is fucking awful. And I reflect on that because that's what got me through, was that I knew this wasn't my destination. This was just part of my journey. And so it was there to be observed and to be documented, but I wasn't going to be here long. And I deeply believed that.
Yeah. So what, you said something really powerful before you spoke about the title of your book, but your mum didn't talk to you for 2 years.
Yeah.
How are you now?
Oh, we're good now, yeah.
Yeah. How did that affect you though? Because you've literally just gone into uni. Yeah. You've got no money. Now I've been there, but if I'd ever needed an extra tenner, yeah. I knew, even though my mum was skin, I knew I could give her a bell, say, Mum, lend me a tenner. Yeah. But you didn't even have that for 2 years. So how did you get through those 2 years when you weren't talking to your mum? Because a big part of your life is your mum, right?
Huge, yeah. And just like my parents generally. And so it was funny because about 6 months after I dropped out and had that conversation with my mum, I ran out of money, so I got on the megabus from Manchester and went back to Plymouth, just I need to get some food or something. And I came home, and my mum was in good spirits. She wasn't angry at me or anything, and I found that really bizarre. And then at dinner, I think at the dinner table, I said something about the fact that I dropped out, and she clearly didn't know. And I reflect on that, and she got really, really angry. She said some things she regrets saying to this day to me. I left that night, got back on the megabus, went to Manchester, and it turns out my dad, for an easy life, had kind of told her I'd gone back to uni, and she just realised again. But it was difficult, but at the same time, I didn't have a choice. For me, the biggest risk you can possibly take is living that life that you know is not true to yourself. And this is why I've always been at such ease in these difficult life decisions, like quitting Social Chain, like quitting my first business. Because for me, it's a very clear choice. And when it becomes a very clear choice, it's not an emotional one. Did I want to stay in university doing something I hated, pursuing a path that I did not believe in? Or did I want to pursue myself? The answer is quite clearly in that situation, I'm going to pursue myself and my dreams. So if the consequence of that is losing friends, my mum, whatever, then so be it. And I've come to learn in hindsight that in fact, what me and my mum always wanted the same thing. And this tends to be the case with your family. We both wanted me to be secure and safe and happy.
Yeah.
We just disagreed on the path to get there. And my mum's reaction came from her own hard to understand place of love. And yeah, she stood in my way because she loved me. And that's again something that I really reflect on in hindsight. And sometimes people can't see the path for you.
Yeah.
Only you can see it. And every single time you change course, whether that's deciding to leave that job or to leave that city or whatever, there will be a process of resistance, shedding friends, shedding an old identity. And that is just, and all great things in life come at a cost. That is just one of the costs. But for me, you have absolutely no choice. These are not difficult decisions. We make them complicated.
Why do you think we make them complicated?
Because
the people that can't make those decisions,
yeah,
like some people can, what do you think is the reason why? What are they hanging on to?
It's just this fundamental misunderstanding of what life is about. Like, we can all agree that the North Star of all of our lives, I don't have to know you to know this, is to be happy. That is the North Star. And also, when you just add into that the fact that we don't get to live forever. So that's the North Star. I make all of my decisions with that North Star in mind. So people-pleasing, what my mum might think, what someone else might think, how people might judge me, all of these things, they are all secondary to that. The biggest risk in life isn't my mum falling out with me or this person saying that or anything. The biggest risk is me not pursuing that happiness. So it's funny because people hear my story and they think, oh my God, that guy is so brave. I know. Staying at university and pursuing that life, that would have been brave. Because that was the risk. That was the risk to my happiness. That was a risk I wasn't brave enough to take. And in fact, I'm a bit of a coward because I take the easy and the only option all the time, which is to do it my way, pursue my happiness on my terms. The risk is staying in a job for 20 years that you know is soul-destroying and that isn't in line with who you are. And in order to understand risk, we have to agree upon the goal. If we all agree upon that is the goal, then we can assess risk properly. I'm not brave. I never was. I would have been, as I said, I would have been really fucking brave to not do what I did. I couldn't do it. I'm a coward.
A round of applause for that one, both ladies and gentlemen. That's awesome, man. Okay, so we're at uni and we're just about to go into the big bad world and start a business. What was that first business? Tell us now the journey of Social Chain, how that started.
Yeah, so very simple. I walked into the halls of residence at my university. I saw they still have physical notice boards with like post-it notes on. So I thought, this is crazy. We have 100,000 students in Manchester basically on this one big road. Why don't we just put the notice board online? Did that, called it Wallpart, found developers and all this, all the stuff you have to do, found an investor. Bear in mind, I was 18 at the time, had zero experience.
How does an 18-year-old go to an investor and ask for money?
Do you know what? It's actually not that hard. So, a couple of things. As you'll come to learn today, and I'm sure this is what much of this today is about, like sales is probably the most important thing in life. And if you knock on enough doors and you say things in the right way, the doors will open. And honestly, like raising money is not that hard. I also got particularly fortunate with my first investment raise where I went on LinkedIn, typed in the word investor, and the first guy that came up, a guy called Alistair Milne, I sent him an email. Hi, Alistair, here's who I am and here's what I'm doing. I'm 18 years old living in Manchester. Funnily enough, I'm 18 years old living in Manchester. I'm looking for £10,000 to start my business. And he ended up being the first person to invest in my company. Just the first guy off LinkedIn. People say, oh, that's so lucky. But
Bloody hell.
I look at the email and I show it on stage. I sent the email at 3 a.m. That's when you think, okay, maybe he wasn't so lucky. Like, where was everyone else at 3 a.m.? And I would just persist. And it's the same with all facets of the business. How did I find a developer that was amazing and committed to building the website, a social network basically, for free in exchange for equity? You just keep at it. Message enough. And because the crazy thing is, and I'm sure so many of you will resonate with this, when you're looking for skilled people to become your co-founder or to help you with your business, you don't actually know what good looks like. You don't know what a good developer is and a bad developer. So like 4 months sat in that room in Manchester just emailing developers and just trying to figure out who was good and bad, trying to persuade them. And it's the same with all aspects of my business. A lot of doors knocked on, you know, putting myself out there for opportunity to get that luck, right?
It's such an important skill. Like I remember when I first started reading books about all this sort of stuff when I was younger, one thing that kept coming up in all the books I read, no matter who it was, Branson, Tony Robbins, all of these guys that I was reading books of, every single one of them at one point said there's one skill you have to master if you want to be successful, and that's how to sell. Yeah. So before I studied anything, before I ran a marketing agency and did all of this stuff, I studied selling. Mm-hmm. We're going to be learning about sales, by the way, from Mr. Spencer Lodge during this EMC. So yeah, it's a really, really, really awesome skill. So okay, you had your first investment, but what was that business then? It was obviously something to do with social media.
Yeah, it was. Think of it like a student notice board. Slightly smarter in the sense that if you're in Manchester, there's 3 universities there. So if you have something which is specific to just Salford University in Manchester, you can send it just so those students see it. If it's applicable to all students in Manchester, you could target it at that. You categorize it, you post it, kind of like Twitter. The concept of the website was sound. The issue was I didn't realize who my competitors were. You don't think of, typically in all of our businesses, we don't think of Google and Facebook as our competitors. And what I came to learn a year later when I was figuring out how to get people to come to the website was I made a Facebook group. Bear in mind, this is back in like 2013, 14 maybe. I made a Facebook group that did the exact same thing as my website in order to drive people over to my website. And the Facebook group was getting a post every 1-2 minutes. It was absolute craziness. I say all the time, if my website had been as successful as that Facebook group, I would have been a multi-millionaire. I probably would have made 100 million by the age of 20. But so I look at this Facebook group and I'm trying to drive them over to my website, constantly trying to drive them over to my website. And so I think I'm like, I'll shut the Facebook group and tell them that if they want to do what they're doing now, they have to come to my website. And then like think about the madness. And this for me is a real business lesson. Humans are behaving in a certain way. And I'm so romantic about my own hypothesis that I'm trying to stop them behaving in the way they want to behave and behave in the way that I want them to behave, right? So I shut this Facebook group. I pin a post there. I say, you've got to do it on my website. No one fucking does it on my website. It just stops.
They're on Facebook, that's why.
Yeah, they're on Facebook, right? And and so this is why Social Chain was born. At some point, I gave up on the website and realized you could do all of this stuff. You could build community on social media. And that maybe, the place for that kind of behavior on an external website made no sense anymore. But I could go into the details as to why it makes no sense. And so 2000, my investors didn't believe me. Kind of fortunate in hindsight because I got to take all of our assets with me. But in 2013, I made the decision that I was going to build like every Facebook group, Facebook page, or acquire them, or Twitter page in the world. So 21 years old, I resigned from that company. I say to my investors, I'm taking these social media pages with me, which they didn't believe in. And I went around the world and met every young kid in their bedroom before anyone cared about social media, hired them all, acquired all their social media pages, got to the point where I had 100 million followers. And when you have 100 million followers, it's easier to get 1 more million. You just share the new page onto your existing ones. So you'll know some of the pages that we still own. Like we own the biggest gaming page in the world on Facebook called GameBite. Tens of millions of followers. We own the biggest student page in the world on Facebook, which we built back then, Student Problems. Tens of millions of followers. We own Sporf. Some of you all know Sporf. Big sports page on Twitter. And there's 13 million followers on Instagram. The biggest fitness page in the world. The 3rd biggest food page in the world. Biggest, you could go through the whole list. We own a huge YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, hundreds of millions of followers. In 2017 was our peak year. We did 5 billion video views on Facebook alone, which put us number 6 in the world, ahead of like Fox News and News Corp and all of that.
What were some of the weirdest Facebook pages you owned?
Like
little niche ones.
We would just try things. We would try topics. So like sandwich problems, or like we have like the biggest Harry Potter page in the world, or like just really obscure Sims, the biggest Sims, the video game page in the world. Those kinds of things. Owned hundreds and hundreds of Twitter pages, and we had our gimmick, which was we can make anything the number 1 trending topic within 30 minutes. So if you go on Google, you'll find BuzzFeed came to our office and said, "Do it." Yeah. Within 12 minutes, in the BuzzFeed reporter writes, it's trending #1. Vice News came to our office, and that video is still on YouTube. They said, do that thing you do with the trending topic. Again, within 30 minutes, it's the #1 most talked about thing in the country. And this was our thing. It was like our performing, back in the day. We don't do that shit anymore. But that's kind of what arose us to, and we would always play to that. So I would go to Disney and meet all of Disney's executives in Paris at Disneyland, 200 of their executives, and I would tell them that I'm going to make something Disney related the #1 trending topic while I'm stood on stage. Text my team, bum 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 bum. This is the hashtag. Do this. I'd get it from the audience, and by the time I got off stage, they could go on their phones and see it was the most talked about topic on Twitter. And that was what we were doing.
It's the best sales presentation you could ever have.
Easy. Yeah, but it comes with both sides. People at the time didn't understand this, so they thought we were evil. But I was okay with that. Because that, again, the thing you can't sell in life is indifference. You can't sell indifference. If people don't care, you can't sell that. So you had a load of people that hated us and were like, scum of the earth, Illuminati. And then you had a bunch of people that were really amazed, but the phone rang constantly. And we know, and this is a crazy thing, which I don't think people realize, we're a media business on this hand and an agency business. We never, up until the point that I quit the business, had a sales team, ever. We never did outbound sales, ever. And we worked with the biggest in the world. We did Uber's marketing across the United States, Coca-Cola across Europe, 14 markets. We never had a sales team. And and even my philosophy has always been, I'd rather be a peacock than a salesman. So what we do is personal branding. This is why people know me, because we were focused on personal branding. It was probably our #1 sales channel. It especially was in the early years. Word of mouth became bigger in the later years. And we advertised our own business like we did our clients' businesses. So we always did announcements and launches, and I set up the business so every 2 weeks we'd do a big announcement. Never needed a sales team, never.
But you were the head sales, but you were selling because you were out there, weren't you? You were getting your personal brand out there. You were doing all of this stuff.
Yeah. Gary Vaynerchuk's a good friend of mine. He says we speak to him every day this week, and he says the same thing. Don't need it. And if you have to rely on an outbound sales team, it's hard work. I'm going to tell you something I've never told an audience before, but just to give you, it gives a really nice picture of the power of personal branding and doing what I did as opposed to having to build a sales team. When I went and met Logitech, right, a client we were pitching for, I shit you not, 10 people in the room for the pitch. 10 of them asked for photos. Imagine trying to sell something to someone when they know you so well that they want to take a photo with you. It's much easier than begging them on the, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I always say that to my team because my team, Paul from my team came with me. He's ex-Mediacom. He's like, I've never seen that before. And for me, it was a representation of, we'd done so much work outside of that room that when we walked in there, they knew us. They knew me, and they already had that social proofing, so I didn't have to sell to them. And Logitech, I think still to this day, are one of our big clients.
Yeah.
So,
So building it up to Social Chain to that size, because you sold it. When did you sell it? Was it last year?
It listed on the stock market in 2019. So that was the exit, I guess.
A couple of 100 million, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it's like I was not checked today, but I think it's 450 million today.
Give a round of applause for that, ladies and gentlemen. 450 million.
490.
490 million.
Exactly. I can't take credit for that. I mean, it's continued to go up since I left. So
one question that I really wanted to ask you, when you were growing it, what was the darkest time? What was the time where you came close to potentially shutting the doors? What's the closest you got to having it?
Yeah, on so many occasions. Yeah, I've got some crazy.
Give us the closest one. Because it happens, all entrepreneurs, right? As entrepreneurs, we go through these stages where it's like, fucking hell, I don't think we're going to survive another 3 months. But when people see someone like you, they see the success, they see you selling it for a company that's now worth 400 and whatever million. They don't see that 4 years ago there was probably a good chance you were about to shut your doors.
So many times. So I was never going to shut the doors by choice. It was running out of money. So I'm going to tell one story because I think it's the most entertaining. I'll tell you 2 stories about when we basically nearly went under. So which one should I tell first? And I can tell these stories in great detail now that I've left. You know what I mean? It's like at the time there's sensitivities, oh, client's going to call me. It's like I'm a free man now, leave me alone. There was one time where a client of mine, I'm going to say the name as well, Badoo, the dating app, this was very early, we must have been 2 years old, when we didn't have enough money in the bank account to pay our wages. And it was a cash flow problem we had. We didn't have enough money to pay our wages. I went and met the head of marketing at Badoo in London, and I knew that I needed, I think it was like 120 grand to cover the wages. So I said to him, and I obviously wouldn't tell him anything, but I said, pay us 20 grand for this campaign. And if I can make Badoo the #1 trending topic, I'm writing in the contract that a balloon payment of 90,000 has to be paid within 48 hours. So signed the contract with him, went back to my team, got Hannah and Dom in the room. I said, listen, we got to make this thing trend #1 on Twitter. And we're all sat there that night doing the campaign on our laptops, and you can see it. Everyone starts talking about Badoo around the world, and we're like, fuck. Because I'm thinking if it doesn't trend, we can't pay wages.
Yeah.
We can't, so I was the CEO for 7 years. We never missed wages.
Yeah.
Never, ever in those 7 years. Closed 15 times. And anyway, it trends #1. And the relief, I contact Badoo, I say, listen, here it is trending. They send the money, I pay wages. The other example is even more extreme, which was speaking in London at an event like this, and I'm on stage. So this was later on in my time at Social Chain. We had this one client, that sounds like a lot of money, that was going to pay us several million, right? They've asked me to, but they haven't signed the contract yet, right? So our bank says we won't release, basically there's no money in the bank. But if you send us a signed contract from a client, we will release money to cover your wages.
Right.
This is on the day of payday, right? So I'm on stage in London speaking to this client who I won't name, and I know that I have to get someone in this room, I shit you not, to sign a contract worth 4 million. And I've got in my WhatsApp group, I've got all of the finance team saying, Steve, try and get the CEO to sign the contracts, try and get someone to sign I do this presentation, this talk, my big presentation, da-da-da-da. It's like 150, 200 executives. They all go into the bar. And I'm thinking, shots.
Let's get them pissed.
We are at the bar. I'm with this company's a big global brand. They're worth 50 billion or something crazy. And I'm at the bar with all of them. I'm saying, the contract, with that deal we talked about, I just basically need one of you guys to sign it. They're like, yeah, sure. They carry on drinking. I'm like, so guys, yeah, anyone want to, got it on here on Adobe e-sign on my phone. Anyone want to give this a hand? Yeah, sure. Drinking. And late that night, maybe, I don't know, 9 p.m., 10 p.m., one of them, I think his name's Richard, goes, yeah, pass it here. Signs 5 different contracts on my phone with his finger. I WhatsApp that across to my finance team. They send it off to NatWest. NatWest release the money. The next day, everyone's paid, next day was the official payday, Friday, and no one ever knew. And that happened, when I say over the 7 years, 15 times, on payday, trying to figure out a way to make sure that we're good.
Yeah. It's just having that initiative in those times, isn't it, to think of something on the spot that you can do. It
happens so often, and there were so many moments of chaos and crisis like that you just start to believe that you'll figure it out.
Yeah,
and you're calm in those moments. I'm not panicking. I'm not, we'll figure this out like we figured out every other piece of bullshit. And it's remarkable when you look back on it and you think, how come one time, one of those incidences didn't destroy us? Don't really know why, but it's remarkable.
Yeah, I've been there.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Raise your hand, by the way, just quickly, just raise your hand if that's made you feel better.
Yeah, that's why. That's my incentive to tell that story, because I know everyone's going to go through that. When my friends,
everyone goes through it. Everyone goes through it. But honestly, the amount of people, they think that, again, it's all comparison. It's all this bullshit that we look out and we see people like Steven's a good example. You look at him and think he's got it all figured out. He's had it easy. He's done all this stuff. I can't even make payroll this month. But he's there telling you, it's happened to him 15 times. The day of payroll, he's got to make a £4 million deal or he ain't making payroll. So that's why I wanted to ask that question, to inspire you guys a bit. We all go through the tough times. It's what we do in those moments to get out of it.
That sounds like bullshit, that story I just told, and I promise you it's true. The figure, the day, WhatsApping Dave, Christian, Dom in that WhatsApp group with the contract. We laugh about this behind the scenes now, but I promise you it's true. And I could tell you a lot of more stories. They're not as interesting as that one. That one feels like a bit of a movie, but I promise you it's true. I have no incentive. I'm not a bullshitter. You know what I mean? And my incentive, like, I know sharing that will help someone in that moment. And I know that moment's coming for you. If you start a business,
100%.
it's coming for you. Not quite like that, you know, but similar. It'll feel the same, you know.
So okay, because we're running out of time, man. But this is great. But you know, you've sold Social Chain now, which is just a massive achievement, huge sums of money, and now you're doing a podcast.
Yeah, yeah.
Talk to us about that. Like, how do you get yourself G'd up for something like that? What was the reason? It obviously means something personal to you, or you wouldn't be doing it. Talk to us about the podcast and why you went down that route.
So the podcast just fits into one of that bucket of my life of just like things I do because I enjoy it. And that's really it. Like, it's an absolute privilege and an honor to get to... I was thinking about it last night. I was actually saying it to my business partners last night, saying it's just like one of the greatest honors of my life to get to do something that I genuinely enjoy, that helps me build my network and meet new people, that genuinely becomes some of my best friends, that makes money, that has impact on other people that listen to it. It's just like the greatest thing. It just like ticks all of the boxes you might want to tick from something you spend your time doing. That's a small part of my life. There's my other parts of my life is I'm a creative director at this big mental health biotech worth $3 billion. I'm an investor there. Huel, a lot of you know about Huel, big UK brand. I'm on the board there. I mean, I think I'm like the third biggest investor in Huel. I invest in tons of companies, maybe 20 or 30. I'm building 2 companies at the moment, which nobody knows about. One of them is in the blockchain space called Access Packs with the development team in San Fran. The other one's called Flight Story, which is kind of like a marketing business, marketing recruitment business. Helps companies as they're about to IPO get their comms team ready. So we hire their comms team, give them all the people and processes and strategy they need to have a successful IPO in a world now where retail investors, people like me and you, are really important. Those are my 2 core companies.
So what industries are you looking into to invest in then? What are you? We'll get onto Dragon's Den in a second.
Yeah, yeah.
But what's your radar looking out for?
All over the place. I'm really agnostic in that field. I like businesses where I think I can pull a lever to make them worth more. But yeah, you know, you'll see in Dragon's Den, my investments are really varied, and in my personal life, they're really varied as well. I'm really betting on entrepreneurs, you know, when I do my investments. Yeah.
So have you finished filming now? Let's talk about Dragon's Den. So you finished filming?
Yes, and I'm allowed to say that now. Yeah, I finished filming.
And when does, for everyone, I want to know, when does it air?
I think it's gonna air in January. So filmed for about 20 days, saw about 100 pitches, and it airs in January. I sit between Peter and Deborah. Yeah, Peter and Deborah, yeah.
And what are you looking for when someone walks through the door?
It's exactly what I've said there. It's I remember when I was 18 and I got that money off Alistair Milne, the guy I told you about, the first name on LinkedIn. And Alistair met me in London. And I remember coming to the hotel in London. And I still remember to this day because someone came up and poured my water for me. And I was like, what the fuck? And Alistair saw my reaction and goes, you better get used to this. But he went on in that conversation to say to me, he goes, do you know what, Steve? I don't really know what Wallpark is, I've got to be honest with you. And I just remember being like, what an idiot. Like, total idiot. You invested in a business, £10,000 in a business, and you don't know what it does. And he goes on to say, but I just know you'll do something good one day. And I remember coming away from there thinking, that guy is stupid. Like, not because I didn't believe in myself, but this thought of like giving an entrepreneur money, even if you don't understand the business. But as I've got older and I've started investing myself, it makes all the sense in the world.
What, because he saw something in you that you now see in other people, so you get it?
Because you're just investing in the entrepreneur. And a really great product in the hands of a shit entrepreneur is a bad investment. But like a meh product in the hands of a really good entrepreneur is a great investment. And the way that I really learned it, the painful way, was my first ever investment was in a product that I loved in the hands of a shitty entrepreneur. And I lost the money, right? Yeah, and I fucking hell, like, that was a brilliant business, but in the wrong hands. So now I prioritize that. So when an entrepreneur walks through the den, at the doors of the den, the lift, I'll think to myself, like, even if I love this business, if there's a character problem with this entrepreneur, they're not trustworthy, or for some reason, this business has been stagnant for 5 years.
Yeah.
And they're telling me in the 6th and 7th it's going to explode. And I think, well, if that business was in my hands, I wouldn't have let it be stagnant for 6 years. Where's that drive? What's stopping them? So it's all about the entrepreneur for me.
So if you know, what would you say makes a good entrepreneur in your minds?
It's so many things. I'd say having like specific and deep knowledge in your area of expertise is incredibly important. But really, it's like fundamental character traits. Things like, I'd say, resilience.
Yeah.
Because as I said earlier, that I know every entrepreneur that starts a business is going to go through excruciatingly difficult moments that feel like they're only happening to them, where it makes more sense to quit. And you're looking for the character type that can solve through that situation, which means that emotionally solve through it, but also like logically and pragmatically solve through that situation. If you can bet on that character, then they're going to be able to survive all of the inevitable storms. So yeah, it's really that like dealing with problems emotionally and with your mind.
Problems like having to make payroll on the day of payroll.
Just awful problems, just like the pandemic, like unexpected but inevitable bullshit, which as a business owner, you cannot avoid. No matter how brilliant you are, it's coming for you. So let's not try and stop it happening, because it's going to happen. It's more about like the way you deal with it when it arrives. So,
yeah, brilliant. So with your podcast and your book, I just want to tell everyone about it just while you're up here to do you a little favour. Raise your hands if you've actually read Steven's book yet.
Just put your hand up even if you haven't, for my ego.
Okay, so I've got to confess, until last night I hadn't read it. I should have. I didn't find out I was interviewing until last week. So last night, but I'm a big fan of his podcast. So Happy Sexy Millionaire, make sure you read it. It's amazing. Honestly, it was such a good book. And his podcast, The Diary of a CEO, is fantastic. And he's had some big guests on it. Who's been your favourite guest on that podcast so far?
Ooh, it's a tough question.
This is being recorded, by the way, so they
so many. The guests are all so good for so many reasons, but I'm going to say, maybe because it's front of mind, but Professor Steve Peters, who wrote the book The Chimp Paradox, who I'm sure all of you know, but just what he said about the mind and the neuroscience, and I just wish someone had told me 15 years ago, and I actually say that in the podcast, and I know you think you told me earlier, you just listened to that episode, like, I just wish I knew that 15 years ago, I would have made much better decisions in all facets of my life. Understanding how the mind works and that there's different sections to the mind and why the chimp is there and how it can be self-destructive or beneficial in your mind, it was just like the penny drop.
Yeah.
I thought, fuck. And then the other one that always sticks out to me was a guy called Nir Eyal, and he wrote a book about how to not be distracted called Indistractable. And again, it's one of those things, because we all deal with procrastination, we all avoid things in life. And actually, the key sentence from that podcast that really sticks out to me is, we all think we're pleasure-seeking. We all think we're living our lives searching for pleasure. But in fact, it's the opposite. We spend our lives trying to avoid psychological discomfort. And so whenever I find myself procrastinating or not wanting to do something, ever since that podcast, I'll say, what is the psychological discomfort I'm trying to avoid? So like if you know you have an essay to do in school, a lot of the psychological discomfort comes from not having the information to start, not knowing where to start, not feeling capable of starting. So the task itself intimidates you, which causes psychological discomfort. So we end up washing the dishes, cleaning the house, doing anything we can to avoid the psychological discomfort. Same with the gym. You'll think, because maybe you're not very good at doing workouts or people looking at you or whatever, that causes intimidation, which causes psychological discomfort. And when you understand that, and you can ask yourself the question whenever you're procrastinating or avoiding something or avoiding having that tough conversation, you say, what is the psychological discomfort I'm trying to avoid? You break it down and then you can overcome it.
Yeah.
If you don't do that, it just feels like, oh, I don't want to do that. So I do it, I probably spoke to him 3 years ago, and weekly I'll say to myself, Steve, what is the psychological discomfort here? What is it you're not telling yourself about this situation? And it's usually something petty. It's usually something small.
Yeah.
And that helps me take action towards doing doing it. That really changed my life as well.
Yeah, mate, same. I can resonate with it so much because for me it was exactly the same. It was becoming very, very self-aware. And the way I look, it's a great book, by the way, but I look at it as just my subconscious. Over the years, because I've trained it, I've turned it up. So I can't bullshit myself. I know if I'm not doing something that I should be doing, I now know the real reason I ain't doing it. And when you do know that, it's impossible to not do it because you know that the lie you're telling yourself is bullshit.
Exactly.
And it's just lies that you tell yourself so that you don't have to do the thing that you know you need to do. Procrastination's a bitch. Anyway, we're nearly out of time, but I wanted to ask you, if you could have dinner, this is such a corny question, isn't it? But I wanted to ask it anyway. If you could have dinner with 5 people, dead or alive, who would they be?
Oh, God, it's such a tough one. I'm going to say Elon Musk.
Yeah.
And the reason I say Elon Musk is because I'm just really compelled to him because he's taking on challenges that are clearly so much greater than himself. And if you've read about Elon Musk, he's given up his personal worth, sold his home, sold his possessions, because they are, in his own words, they become a PR distraction. This is someone that is genuinely mission-driven. And also, the other thing I find really admirable and I want in my own life is he's resisted his labels throughout his life. He had one success with a company called Zip2 you've probably never heard about, which made him a multi-millionaire. And then he went and did PayPal, and then Tesla, then Neuralink, putting microchips in your brain, then SpaceX, rockets to space. This is someone who has these tremendous ambitions and doesn't just have one in one area. It's pursuing multiple across multiple. So that really inspires me. I'm going to say Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who was one of the real sort of amazing, I'd call her like a superpower law changers in America, fought for women's rights and for men's rights as well. I'm going to say Barack Obama, because I just love to understand some of those real intense decision-making moments. I got to meet him in Brazil.
I was going to say, you just spoke on the same event as him, didn't you?
Yeah, and one of the things he said about getting to 51% certainty on big decisions, talking about having to kill bin Laden, not having all the information. He might not be there in that place in Pakistan, but if I can get to 51% certainty, then I can get to peace. And we spend all of our lives trying to get to 100% certainty on big decisions. That causes procrastination. We'll never get there. So getting to a majority and then being at peace that with the information you had, you made the best decision. I found that really inspiring. And the stuff he says about equality as well, I find amazing. Who else? So that's 3.
Two more.
Gonna say, I'm just looking at my hallway in my house. This is gonna sound super controversial.
So?
I'm gonna say Hitler. And, you know, a lot of the reason I do my podcast is because I want to understand people's psychology, like what it was in their childhood that made them believe what they wanted to. And I find that's probably why I'm also like obsessed with serial killers. So I'd invite Hitler just to try and understand what compelled such evilness.
That's a good one.
Probably learn a lot from that.
That is a really good one.
And then lastly, Joe Rogan.
Joe Rogan, yes. Yeah. God, Rogan's on my list. Rogan's on my list.
He might be able to help me bring some stuff out of Hitler. Yeah.
Hopefully you can get on his podcast soon. That would be awesome.
Yeah, I hope so, one day.
Just don't smoke a joint with him.
No. No comment.
Right, Steven, man, listen, that's all we've got time for, unfortunately. But ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for Steven Bartlett.
Thank you. Thank you, mate.
Cheers, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for putting this event on as well. Thank you.
And that's that. I really hope you enjoyed that interview and that video from EMC. It was a privilege to sit down with Steven, and what an inspirational guy. I really hope that added value. What was the biggest learning or the biggest thing that you got from watching that video? Leave me a little comment in the comments below and I'll be sure to get back to you. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. I release 2 new digital marketing training videos every single week, just like this one. If you want to watch another one of my videos right now, click around here somewhere and go and watch it. My name's Matt Wilson. I'll see you in the next one.